2013. Okay, so we'll start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato sama sambuddhassa. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, so we've been examining in the middle-length discourses Sutta number 109. This is the Maha-punnama Sutta, the greater discourse on the full moon night. And this is concerned with questions and answers on the 5 aggregates. Okay, so we've gone through the paragraph number 8 on the way the term aggregates applies to the 5 aggregates. So now we come to paragraph number 9, or section number 9. Here the monk who is speaking questions the Buddha, what is the cause and condition for the manifestation of, each of the 5 aggregates. And so now with this question, in a way we are passing from a simple analysis of the 5 aggregates, and now we've come into, you could say, into the domain of dependent origination, or conditionality. Okay, so the Buddha answers by taking each aggregate in turn, and so he starts with the aggregate of material form, or rupa. So what is the cause and condition for the manifestation of the form aggregate? The 4 great elements are the cause and condition for the manifestation of the material form aggregate. Actually, the 4 great elements belong to the aggregate of material form. So I think we have to understand this in the sense that all the other constituents within the aggregate of material form are based upon the 4 primary elements. So what are the 4 primary elements that we already know? The earth element, water element, fire or heat element, and then the air or wind element. Then what are the types of form that will arise based on the 4 great elements? Some examples of secondary material form. Johnny, you know?
I should know. I remember you mentioned that before. Is my heart, is all my body parts considered secondary?
Well, I think you could say that the four great elements are also in the physical body. So not everything in the physical body is secondary. Any guess? Just take a chance. Stephen. No, those solidity, liquidity, those are just more precise ways of explaining the characteristics of the four great elements. But when the four great elements combine, then certain other properties or types of material phenomena emerge. Well, this is just the term that's used, derivative. Types of matter based on the four great elements. Excuse me? I didn't catch the word.
A mountain?
A mountain? No. The mountain, you would say, is a combination of the four great elements.
Oh, okay.
You're wrong. Right. That's very good. That's in the types of secondary matter. So within the eye, what we call the eye, there's a special type of matter which is said to be sensitive to forms. Within the ear, there's a certain type of matter which is sensitive to sounds. Similarly, within the nose, not this part that comes out here, but up at the top of the inside of the nostrils, there's a type of material phenomena which is sensitive to odors. And then spread out through the tongue, there is, well, I think we would call them in modern terms taste buds. These would be like the nerve endings that are sensitive to different tastes. And then spread out through the surface of the body and also on the inside of the body, maybe in the membranes, there is a sensitivity to tactile sensations. Okay, so that's a class of types of derivative matter. Then there's some other types of derivative matter that correspond to these. That would be color, sound, odor, flavor. And then it's said in the Abhidhamma that the tactile object are the great elements themselves. But it seems to me that, I don't know, I would distinguish and say that there is a tactile sense or tactile objects which are based on the four great elements but not identical with them. Okay, so that's enough to get some idea of what's meant by secondary matter. But you can make notes of these, so next time when I ask, everybody will be able to tell me immediately. Okay, then there's while we're still in the form aggregate, there's a special relationship between the four primary elements themselves, which is mentioned, is actually developed formally within the Abhidhamma, but I think it's already implicit in the suttas, and that is that the four great elements are called, as a technical term, Anyamanya Paccaya, which means that they are mutual conditions for one another. This means that each of the four great elements depends on the other three great elements, and each of the great elements in turn functions as a condition for the other three great elements. So the four great elements are a little bit like, maybe you could say they're like the four legs of one of these chairs. So the chair can stand only when all four legs are keeping it upright. If you remove one of the legs, the chair will tumble down. And so the four great elements support each other. And we could say that the derivative type of matter is like maybe the seat of the chair, which depends upon the support of all four legs, and the back of the chair, which also depends upon all four legs. Of course, you could take the legs away, and the seat and the back will still be there, but it wouldn't be functioning as a chair anymore. But in the case of the four great elements, it's impossible to remove one without eliminating the others. Maybe we could have scientists with one of these giant colliders like they have someplace in Switzerland. And I think there's another one underground in Texas, shooting photons, is it? Some kind of micro-atomic particle, shooting them at at the compound of the four great elements, trying to knock away one of the four elements, and see if they could do that without destroying the other three. But if they do that, then the other three great elements will dissolve into quarks or something like that. Okay, so the four great elements are the condition for the material form aggregate. And now for the feeling aggregate, the perception aggregate, and the aggregate of volitional formations, they all have the same condition. And that condition is what we call, in Pali, it's phassa, which is here translated contact. And how do we understand phassa, contact? It's explained in the suttas as the coming together of three things. Well, actually, I think I've explained it last week. That is, it's the coming together of object, sense faculty, and consciousness. But the way I like to understand it is, it's the meeting of consciousness with the object through the medium of the sense faculty. Or we could say that it's conscious. Sometimes we speak about the sense faculties as being doors. We use the Pali word dwara. So we could say it's like the consciousness goes out through the door in order to meet the object. So when a form comes into range, then I can say that consciousness goes out through the door of the eye to meet the visible form object. Then when the consciousness sort of shakes hands with the form, that is contact. Or we could think of the object coming in through the door of the sense faculty and meeting the consciousness. So it's like first the object knocks on the door, then if one pays attention to the knocking, then one says, "Come in," and the object comes in, and meets the consciousness inside, you would say, inside the mind. And so that coming together of the mind or consciousness with the object is contact. And as soon as contact takes place, three other things occur simultaneously with the contact. First, one experiences the object in some way as being, one experiences the tone or flavor of the object. That means one experiences the object, if it has a really distinctive flavor, then one experiences it He'll regard form as the self, or the self as something separate from form, which possesses it. So the self is the owner of material form. Or else he can regard material form as in the self, or the self as in material form. And so if we let X represent any of the five aggregates, then we have self equals X, self owns X, what was the third one? Self is in X? No, it's X is in the self. And then the last is the self is in X, where X can represent any of the five aggregates. And so some of the texts give some examples to illustrate, or at least similes to illustrate some of these types of identity view. For example, the self owns the aggregate, just as a farmer might own 5 cows. So the farmer is different from the cows, but the farmer is the owner of the cows. Then the self is, or the aggregate is in the self. This is like the view of a great big universal self, and then everything exists within that universal self. So this is like the self is like a box, and then the aggregates are like the different items that one puts in the box. So the self might be like a jeweled box because one considers the self very precious. And the 5 aggregates might be like, maybe like coins that one puts in the box. And then the view that the self is in consciousness, or the self is in the aggregate, this is the view that maybe the self is something like very subtle that exists somewhere within the innermost core of the person. This was a view that became very prominent in the thought of the Upanishads, which existed in India at the time of the Buddha. That it said that when you look into the innermost depths of the person, you strip away everything else, the body, the feelings, the thoughts, the volitions, even the consciousness or the superficial consciousness. At the innermost core, you come to the eternal, immutable, unchangeable, pure awareness, which is the true eternal self. And so this is like a jewel, maybe encased within some kind of maybe a ball of clay, and inside the ball of clay